All right, we're live. Matt, Alex, what's up, guys? First and foremost, thank you to both of you two for being a part of this Bitcoin Independence Day stream. Know that you guys are both putting in hours here, so really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, so hey, quick shout out to everyone watching and trying to use getcarrot.com or earncarrot.com. Gosh, trying to use earncarrot.com. If you're trying to put in the code to get sats, you need to go to the surveys section and find the appropriate survey, plug in your code, and then you're going to get the sats on earncarrot.com. Matt and Alex, I know you two both have very strong opinions about the attack vectors that KYC and AML have. I have to give a shout out to Parker. I don't think anyone here likes KYC AML laws, but the actual conversation that him and Ragnar had was about can KYC AML laws actually stop Bitcoin from becoming a global currency? So, I mean, I thought really good points were made. I think Ragnar's perspective is very interesting and different. So I guess, Matt, you were on the conversation. Do you want to kind of give, your thoughts initially?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone likes KYC except maybe Brian Armstrong. KYC is dangerous. It's dangerous for users. We see it every day in our lives. I really enjoyed that conversation. I was glad to be a part of it. A lot of the listeners here might know I have very strong opinions about it, but I do think, like, when you distill it, KYC AML is more of a short-term issue, and it's more of an issue for individual users rather than Bitcoin, the network, the protocol, the money, in terms of long-term surviving.
Yeah.
And I do think it works itself out. This is where I disagree with Ragnar, where I think it works itself out long-term because the circular economy will get stronger and stronger and stronger. You will have merchants accepting BTC Pay, using BTC Pay or similar self-sovereign stacks to accept Bitcoin without a third party. And you will have users, so you'll have users spending instead of selling Bitcoin, and you'll have users earning instead of buying Bitcoin. And when you do that, you remove these centralized third parties that are often pressured into implementing KYC AML regs.
Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very sympathetic to Ragnar's viewpoint. It's something we need to be very concerned about. However, I think long-term, there are some bigger kind of macro forces at work here, I think. And maybe I'm talking many decades from now, but this sort of game theory inside Bitcoin, where it just harnesses people's greed, makes it very kind of unlikely that it'll get too concentrated in too few hands. In my view, in several decades, everybody's going to want it, and there's going to be a market for it, and people are going to be spending their time and energy earning it again and spending it. And I am concerned in the short term, like Matt's saying, but I don't think it represents a terminal risk to the network. I also think that we should take a more global. We should try to take. It's hard because you have to do research and talk to people and stuff. But the conversation today was very American centric, and I think maybe actually KYC represents a bigger threat to Americans perhaps than to the world with regard to Bitcoin. You can kind of think of KYC like the thing preventing you from accessing Bitcoin in a way, right? And in America, that may actually be a really big problem. KYC AML laws may actually prevent a lot of Americans from doing what they would normally try to do with Bitcoin. But in Nigeria and in Iran and in China and all these other places, each country has a totally different rule set and sort of like socioeconomic norm set. And there are a lot of just incompetent governments that have bigger problems at the moment. And that's going to sort of stretch into the future. So you could very well see a future in 10 years where it's like way easier to use Bitcoin and not be worried too much about someone hunting you down in a country like Nigeria than in the United States. I don't know if Matt, you have thoughts on that.
I think you can kind of just group it all into a varied level of governments trying to stifle financial privacy.
Mhm.
And I think not only do we get very American centric, we get very like Bitcoin centric, where we see KYC in almost every element of our lives now.
Yeah.
Short of cash, and for a while short of Bitcoin, but now it's becoming more so. But even stuff like creating a Twitter account, which it was way easier to create a Twitter account without tying it to your personal information just 4 years ago. And now, we see just online services in general. Verify your phone number. How do I verify my phone number? We're going to text you a code, and then you're going to give us a code. Now, all of a sudden that account's tied to your phone number. Good luck trying to get a phone number. In America, it's actually easier than some other countries, but good luck trying to get a phone number that's not tied to your identity, right? So we see it, we see it all over the place, and it's the surveillance panopticon that is getting pushed onto individuals, and ultimately it comes down to empowering individuals to make that more difficult and make mass surveillance more difficult in general, whether that's a message, whether that's a Twitter post, or whether that's a financial transaction.
Yeah, and I think really what we're fighting against here is both the normalization and the ability to run mass surveillance. And that's where Bitcoin just is very promising. I'll just give you two examples of companies or sort of startups right now that are kind of bridging the gap here, on sort of both ends when it comes to going from fiat to Bitcoin and vice versa, where they have a halfway negotiated victory. One, of course, would be the idea of something like Strike, right, that Jack Mallers is doing, where yeah, you're using your debit card, which has, of course, is completely tied to your identity. But when you buy something, the only thing that appears on your credit card statement is Strike. It does not say where you are, what you bought. And obviously the goal, the micro goal from what I understand from them is in the context of maybe Colorado, if you wanted to go buy some pot or something, which is legal there, but maybe not legal elsewhere. So this way you don't have to worry about penalties for living your life the way you want to live it, right? And on the other end, the merchant, receives a lightning invoice, right? So they don't know anything about you, right? So it's kind of a helpful halfway. On the other hand, there's this product that my friend Timmy has created in Nigeria, where you can use an open source Bitcoin wallet that is not tied in any way to your identity, and through their app, deposit Naira in any Nigerian bank account. Again, the person receiving the Naira, of course, it's their bank account. It's tied to their whole identity stack. But the bank nor the person necessarily knows who sent it. Okay. So I think we're going to have to start thinking about these kind of halfway protective shields, because the encroachment, as Matt is saying, from all sides on KYCing people and sort of like tying their whole identity stack to their daily movements is a huge threat.
So I want to jump in here really quick, and I think that really this is kind of like the crux of the disagreement between Parker, Ragnar, and maybe other people in the Bitcoin sphere. But in a world where Bitcoin has a circular economy, hopefully in the future, KYC AML doesn't seem like it's as much of a threat. But in a future where maybe Bitcoin doesn't kind of reach this ubiquity and isn't used as a currency and people don't desire Bitcoin, that's where, I think Ragnar is really kind of concerned about the KYC AML infrastructure that's being built up. Like, I guess, what do you guys think about, those two potentials? And like, a lot of us are obviously very bullish on Bitcoin, but if Bitcoin doesn't kind of reach this ubiquity, can KYC actually stop it?
Well, I think there's two concerns here, right? There's the KYC concern that you are identifying yourself as a Bitcoiner in a subset of mostly not Bitcoiners right now. That obviously gets obviated if there is more people that are Bitcoiners. If they know you bought a Ledger wallet or whatever, but everyone's using Bitcoin, then that's not really an interesting data point anymore that you're interested in Bitcoin. But there's a second element there, which is then using that information collection and using these aggregated databases of information, not only KYC, which I tried to make clear in the panel, is that it could be IP addresses, it could be email addresses, it could be phone numbers, it could be app store downloads. Using that to then track transactions on chain and track how much money you own, like how much Bitcoin you have, every single transaction you make. And I think it's important that Bitcoiners be hyper vigilant and be focused on improving the tools that we use to try and use Bitcoin more privately for that second reason, because when you pay someone, they shouldn't be able to know how much your net worth is or what were the last 5-10 transactions you made, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think that again, short term, this is a risk and a threat, and we need to focus on Bitcoin privacy, and that's why Ahrefs has started a fund to support it, and why I think so many other people are fighting in this space. But long term, I think the number go up technology in Bitcoin just makes it it's going to be very desirous to have Bitcoin, no matter who you are around the world, I think in 10, 20 years. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I tweeted this, and obviously people have different opinions on something like this, but even in a future where Bitcoin becomes like super desirous, and a couple mega corps kind of like concentrate the let's say they concentrate a very large amount of it. Now we know that doesn't mean they can control the network or change the rules or anything, as today has demonstrated. But it may not be ideal. What's so interesting about Bitcoin's DNA is that it's kind of like built to be slippery in that case. As I was saying, like maybe there's inside the corporation, as we saw the other day, you could maybe socially engineer people to like free that Bitcoin. Like I just don't see, it doesn't lend itself, I think, in its architecture to being controlled. It's very difficult to control, and that gives me hope in the long term. So I kind of agree, I guess, more with Parker long term, but short term, it's a huge threat. And I think what Ragnar's saying, we need to listen to carefully and focus on privacy tech. And obviously, that's what Matt does.
I mean, I think I guess my point is, like, I think we can reduce the negative impact of KYC and its ability to try and stifle Bitcoin as with KYC if we have better privacy guarantees. Yeah, I think what's interesting is, I know this is a Bitcoin feed, but it's an interesting dynamic if you watch the Monero community, because there's a group of people in the Monero community, they love tweeting at me, that think that if you buy Monero on a KYC exchange, you're not vulnerable like a Bitcoiner is, right? Because they think like the transaction tracking after that fact is obviated, and they're kind of right and they're kind of wrong. I mean, even if you have theoretically perfect privacy, which is not what I'm saying Monero is, but let's just say in Bitcoin land, perfect privacy doesn't exist. But let's say perfect privacy on Bitcoin. If you KYC, they know you own Bitcoin, they know how much Bitcoin you own, and they know when you bought it, when it happened. They have a very strong, concrete data point. If they have a similar data point on the other side, then they can make inferences. But it's definitely an improvement, right? That's my point.
One of the points that Ragnar made that was outside of kind of my worldview of Bitcoin is that there could be a future where future Bitcoin users are kind of complacent to doing what is necessary to keep the network decentralized, that they might not run nodes, that adoption to normies is ultimately kind of bad for the Bitcoin network because it makes the network more vulnerable, and it allows non-ideological people in. What do you guys think of like that idea?
I mean, that's Tocqueville commentary on America, man, from 200 years ago. I mean, he saw that coming here, where people had this super powerful ability in the original framework of how America was built to be very participatory, and to prevent tyranny from growing, essentially. But the more you're lax and the more you're just kind of, doing your thing, and the less you're involved with checking power on, from an individual basis, the more that power will grow. And of course, we've seen that in America, not through outright despotism, but through highly concentrated power in different industries, right? Which has not been great for for our democracy. So you could easily see the same thing happening in Bitcoin over time, where the average user doesn't care. So that's why it's so important that that we kind of like get these changes done now and get the privacy tech built now in the next 3, 4, 5 years, when I guess people who do care about Bitcoin still make up a decent, let's say, percentage of the community. But maybe in 20 years, it's not the case.
I don't know if the percentage really matters as much as
maybe it doesn't.
The absolute number, like the absolute number of diehard Bitcoiners is higher than it used to be.
Yeah. As long as there's what?
It's an intolerant minority. I think Bitcoin's security model relies on an intolerant minority.
Yeah, and as long as like tens of thousands of people are running nodes, and as long as there is a very high bar in the community for software development and what constitutes a safe upgrade to the network, you're right. Like there could be 1 billion users and only several thousand people who really care, and the little tiny minority protects everybody else. That's a possibility in Bitcoin's system. Whereas I guess
key to the security model.
Yeah, it's key.
If that's not the case, then Bitcoin is going to just be fucked long term.
Fucked.
Like that's just how I view it.
Yeah, but that seems to be the case right now, right? And it seems that there's no roadmap to it not being the case. So that's kind of bullish, I suppose. Yeah.
We have about like 3 or 4 more minutes here. Do you guys want to give any last thoughts? I guess before we do that, I'll give my last thoughts. And that is that I've always seen Bitcoin as something that is just, it's a little bit bigger than all of us. And, I've always just really believed in Bitcoin changes you more than you will ever change Bitcoin. So maybe right now it's difficult to see a world where everyone just appreciates the decentralization and upholding it. And I struggle to see a world where Bitcoin's incentive structure doesn't influence people in the future. I feel like people don't become apathetic to the incentive structure, if that makes sense. So it's strange to me that Ragnar, thinks that, and even you, Alex, think that future Bitcoiners may be apathetic to, what's necessary to keep it decentralized.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just respond to that then right away. I think people understand the power of the internet, but they don't know how it works. They don't know what TCP/IP is. They don't know how it's all routed together. They don't understand that there's these huge like cables that are laid under the ground, all the geopolitics behind it. And you don't need to understand it because it works. But now we're entering a time where maybe it doesn't work so well because it's been captured in different ways. And I can just sort of see that happening with Bitcoin, where it becomes so easy to use that the average Zoomers that are flocking in to use it in 10 years or whatever we're going to call the next gen, they don't need to know how it works behind the scenes. So I'm glad that it is architected in the way Matt is pointing out, where like you do really only need that intolerant, the sort of angry minority to make sure that it sort of stays stable and secure. If it wasn't built that way, we'd be in big trouble.
I mean, my concern is users, not the network. Is not the protocol, is not the money. My concern is bigger than KYC AML, because if you look at if you look at the internet, we have these killer apps where they just have tons and tons of users, right? Like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and TikTok is under the spotlight now. Gmail, where like the majority of people are using their email. And there's these big centralized providers that their main business model is user data. And if we don't improve the Bitcoin privacy situation, mainly by supporting new tools outside of the Bitcoin protocol that just make it easier to use Bitcoin privately without shooting yourself in the foot, we're going to end up in a situation where you're going to have 1 or 2 apps that know the majority of transactions, and then they're going to be able to extrapolate all this shit. And it's going to get really bad for a bit. It'll get really bad for a bit, to the point where I think it will scare people into improving. So that's why I think it's not going to affect Bitcoin long term, but the users in the meantime will get fucked.
Yeah.
I think you're on mute.
Oh yeah, why don't you guys plug yourselves and then we'll wrap it up.
Matt, you first.
You can find me on Tales from the Crypt. If you search Tales from the Crypt in your podcast app, I'm at Matt_Odell. MattOdell.com has all my links if you need to contact me. Also, check out BitcoinDevList.com and fund some Bitcoin devs.
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at Gladstein, Gladstein, and you can follow HRF at hrf.org. We also have a dev fund. We have some fun news coming out in a couple of days, but you can check that out at hrf.org/devfund if you're interested in making tax-deductible donations to developers. And yeah, happy Bitcoin Independence Day.
Happy Bitcoin Independence Day. Speaking of funding devs, go to Earn Carrot. If you are a core developer or striving to be a core developer, we are paying out sats for proven GitHub commits. So Earn Carrot, guys, the newest Bitcoin faucet. Thank you everyone for watching so far and enjoy the next conversation.